interoperability, which is an important topic. It's also important that you are present in Brussels. So this is expensive. It's expensive to have a permanent lobbyist in Brussels, but before a vote, it's useful to have about 10 people minimum in Brussels, which just stay in a hotel and go up and down Parliament and provide voting lists to the MEPs, discuss with them, and so on. So Parliament is generally very open. The third commandment, another talk today in this room stressed the same issue, is that I recommend you to be honest when you advocate. That means that you shall stick to the truth, or what you regard as an approximation of your current knowledge of the truth, because it makes advocacy of yourself much easier. It's kind of a psychological issue. When you're convinced about, and when you know, I tell what I really know about what I'm convinced about, then you can outperform almost any lobbyist who just promotes a case which is not his own. Someone told me one campaigner is worth 10 traditional lobbyists, and this is certainly true. Perhaps the number has to be corrected even on an upper level. And the real issue is to become a reliable source to these MEPs, provide useful information to them, and create a kind of trustworthy relationship. Generally, MEPs know you better, because so you cannot really masquerade, because there are so many lobbyists which approach them every day, every time. So you get a certain sense as an MEP, you get a certain sense for people, and you easily get whether someone is acting or if someone really defends his own case. And so it's not really good to play tactical games or like that. Usually you gain not much about it. The fourth issue, which I believe is important, is, well, as a kind of suggestion, you don't have to take it literally, but it would be a good advice to try to convince your grandma, because your grandma is probably a person which has goodwill to you, tries to understand you, but probably has not the real capacity to understand why it's important to you. So MEPs are similar. They are often not experts in the issue. They often have goodwill. It depends on their ideology, but in generally you can assume that they are not really against you on an ideological level. So in order to train, to promote your case, it's probably the best to try to convince people who are not in the business, who are not in the community, as a test case. And well, the fifth commandment is to investigate your environment and build a knowledge base about what other groups are doing. Investigate the whole issue. Investigate who's in charge of the whole stuff you're concerned about. And this knowledge base, we found that a wiki system is very suited for it. When you have a community and you collect facts, you collect notes about who's part of that community, or who interacts with whom and where to get the source. So a wiki system is very useful. It's very useful to compile information and just to collect it. This Zettelkasten method, so to speak. When interacting, and this is more about how to present yourself. A kind of contradiction is the sixth commandment. This is don't be anti. Don't be the protest movement. Because the problem is always that when you are the anti-movement, then you defend a kind of conservative case. In some areas, it has to be done like this. Like software patents, you have to say, oh, no software patents. But really, this anti-attitude is not really very much convincing because, well, MEPs or decision makers, they want to change things. They don't want to stay like it is. And if you're just defending, you cannot really gain much. You can just destroy the project, so to speak. But interestingly, you can always turn this around. You can always say, well, we are not against software patents, but we defend the freedom of software development or things like that. It does not work always. Or we defend human rights, or we defend privacy or things like that. You can also always turn this around and create a positive message. And this is often more convincing. You also have to be concerned that in the media, usually there's a standard scheme which somehow gives you an impression how you are regarded in the public, and journalists are usually not really biased. This is usually the strong party, the first party is mentioned, and then there is the first party says we need data retention, and then for balancing, a journalist adds the anti-group and says, but privacy activists say, no, we don't need data retention and it's dangerous. And a kind of indicator of where you stand is whether you are whether your interests are the group which is mentioned first, or whether your interest is mentioned second. This is somehow related to the seventh commandment, and this is beware of the big guy trap. Big guy, small guy trap. Big guy, small guy is a kind of scheme which is very good to gather supporters, and it's quite dangerous. When you look at some contributions at this conference here, some papers and so on, you often find this big guy, small guy scheme. There are the evil conspirators, the monopolists, whatever, they want data retention, whatever. And then you have the small guys which are ignored, and therefore democracy is broken and things like that. The problem is that politicians, while they have sympathy with the small guy, and this is what this scheme somehow plays with, it's in every system, in every community, it's the dominant strategy to side with the big guy, with the more important party. Because in every system, the more important party somehow has to rule. And the other group is the minority opinion. So when there's no reason to depict your own interests as the minority opinion, then simply don't do it. This also applies to the seventh commandment, which I comprehend as don't rationalize. That is, don't say things which you cannot know, because you really don't know it, you just suppose it. You try to rationalize why your opponent wants this, or why the EU starts a legislative project. It's like saying Bush went to Iraq because of oil interests. Actually, I personally don't know whether it was about oil interests. And by doing so, you rationalize, as a mirroring, you rationalize what your opponent does. And often this is associated with a kind of premise. The premise in this Iraq example is that it's immoral to invade a country just because of oil interests. But this premise does not have to be shared among every citizen. And so you have to be very cautious about this. Or like in the software patents debate, many people said, well, Microsoft wants software patents because they want to kill free software. Well, of course, there was one of these Halloween papers which indicated this as an option to destroy free software, but we don't really know whether this is the driving force or the agenda behind. And sometimes I feel that these lobbyists somehow parrot what the other side thinks about it. The ninth commandment is, keep your action under control, or better, know what you do. It's often said in lobbying guides, don't insult MEPs, be kind to them, be friendly, and so on, and dress nice to the common business standards, and so on. But I would rather say it's important that you, for instance, when you insult someone, you don't insult him accidentally or because of an emotion, but because you want it so. Because this is your aim, to insult him in order to create a certain effect. So try to think about what you are currently doing and whether this is efficient or effective and what effects it will have. And not generally be friendly or things like that. And in many cases, it's very useful not to be friendly, but to hit someone or to push someone in a certain direction. Before the first reading of the Software Patents Directive, Arlene McCarthy was heavily targeted by FFRI. And many people inside FFRI thought this was a little bit inappropriate. But the fact was that the vote was obviously won because many people inside Parliament were upset about this particular person, Arlene McCarthy. So this unusual style was, in fact, the appropriate style. And, the 10th rule, the 10th commandment is forget lobbying guides. I mean, develop your own style. Do what you think is good. And usually what we found out was that SME representatives, they somehow magically usually know what to do. They talk to MEPs and they don't obey really to guides or like that. They're used to discuss with customers, and so they can also discuss with other players or other people and MEPs, and they just are themselves and present their interests, and they're very good in that. So you don't need lobbying guides, how to behave and things like that. What I would encourage you is, and I think this is important, don't spam MEPs, because MEPs don't like that. We had the problem with this, I think it was from Compact, this tool which sent automatically generated messages to MEPs. In one copyright debate, there was a problem with a kind of spam tool of the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, which spammed these MEPs, and this was quite unsuccessful. So I suggest you don't pollute Parliament, because those people acting in Parliament and defending this case get serious trouble when all these MEPs and their co-workers are annoyed because they are spammed with these always the same messages, or get 200 messages a day. It could be a useful issue useful instrument when you don't have access to Parliament. But when you have access to Parliament, this is quite damaging. So this is this was the preface.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a little question. I've waited that you finish